Okay, great. We're going to start. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Institute for Research on Poverty's panel discussion on careers in poverty research. I'm Rebecca Schwei, and I'm going to be the host today. We have a wonderful panel of guests who are currently working or have recently been working in poverty research, policy, or human services. Our panelists, as you can see them on your screen right now, and if you can each give me a little wave when I say your name. Lizette Brennis, Camille Hedlund, Jesse Sweet, and Tyler Woods. So I want to thank the four of you for being part of this panel and for participating in some prep calls, and we'll be talking to each of you in just a second. But before we get to the more formal introductions, I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of background on who IRP is and why we're doing this webinar. So as I mentioned, this career panels webinar is hosted by the Institute for Research on Poverty at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our acronym is IRP. IRP is funded by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to serve as the National Poverty Research Center. We've worked cooperatively with HHS since our inception over 50 years ago, when we were created to serve as a nonpartisan independent research institution during the War on Poverty in the 1960s. In addition to producing and disseminating rigorous research on the causes and consequences of poverty and inequality, our mission also includes training and supporting poverty scholars and practitioners. Over the years, we've talked to a lot of college students who are interested in getting involved in poverty research. And I know personally, I've hired a lot of folks over the years, but I think my experience getting a job out of college in 1992, before there was an internet or social networks and social media, really is not that relevant to folks today. And that's why we're connecting you with the real experts, recent-ish college graduates who can share their experiences. I'm just going to click over to the outline for today. So we're going to talk to our four panelists about their experiences in undergrad, the classes they took, volunteer opportunities they had, jobs they had while as undergraduates, research they might have been able to do. And then we're also going to talk about how they got their jobs and how they did their job search and the process for the jobs that they've had. And for those of you who are thinking about graduate school, we'll also talk about how working after college can help you prepare for and apply to graduate school. So our guests today have a broad range of experiences and advice, and I think hopefully people will find it very helpful. For those of you who are listening today, I want to draw your attention to the bottom of your screen where there's a Q&A box. During the presentation, we encourage you to type in questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to incorporate those either during the conversation or at the end. We're going to have hopefully some time to go through questions that we've gotten throughout the presentations. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. We've asked each of the presenters to take a few minutes to tell us about where they went to college, what they studied, and a little bit about their most recent jobs. So I think we're going to start with Camille.
Okay. So hi, just to say my name again, I'm Camille Hedlund, and so I went to college at Cornell University, which is a large institution in Ithaca, New York, and I was a psychology major and a law and society minor. And then to tell you a little bit about where I work at Mdrc, which is an education and social policy research firm. So our mission is actually to, build evidence to improve the lives of low-income individuals and families. And so I started as a research assistant, which is an entry-level position, and I now am a research analyst. Do you want me to say more about what the duties entail?
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what specifically you do at Mdrc?
Sure. So, as a research assistant, you really get to see the entire life cycle of a research project and contribute to the different areas of the project. So that includes helping with proposals to create research studies, whether it's federal proposals for HHS or IES, but also private foundation proposals. And oftentimes research assistants serve as like the coordinators, and they just really manage the entire process for the teams. And then when it actually comes to doing the research, on the qualitative research side, I would help with focus groups and interviews, participating in those, taking notes during them, and then coming back and helping with analysis using qualitative software and helping to draw out themes from qualitative research. I also would help to launch large-scale random assignment studies by working to develop strategies and recruitment materials to get participants interested in the studies.
Great, thanks. So Tyler, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure, yeah, I think it flows well. It's very relevant. So hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler Woods. Thanks for having me on the panel. I'm excited to be able to chat with you guys this afternoon. So I did my undergraduate work at Rice University, which is in Houston, Texas. I studied sociology, and I did a minor in an interdisciplinary program called Poverty, Justice, and Human Capabilities, which is a little bit unique to Rice, but there's a couple other schools around the country that have something that's similar to it. After school, I worked at the Urban Institute, which is similar to Mdrc in a lot of ways, although different in a couple of really particular ones too. So Urban is a social and economic policy research organization. I was a research assistant in our Center on Labor, Human Services, and Population, which is one of our 10 different policy centers. We also have centers that address justice policy, health policy, tax policy, so really a wide variety of substantive policy areas. So I came in as a research assistant and then had been promoted to a research analyst, but they're both considered junior staff. Research assistant is the entry-level role. So to talk a little bit about what a research assistant at the Urban Institute does, similar to Camille's experience at Mdrc, the RA is sort of a jack of all trades, that you really do work across a lot of different projects and a lot of different tasks. So RAs are typically on anywhere from 4 to 7 projects at a time, depending on sort of the time frame and the relative contribution that you have to each of them. And it really spans the whole life cycle of the research process. So over the summertime, we do a lot of proposals. So again, serving as a proposal coordinator, helping to do literature reviews, and really pulling together the pieces for a proposal. For projects that we win, which is obviously a very exciting time, then once you get staffed onto a project, you will typically help out with data collection. So that might involve recruiting sites for site visits where you will do interviews and focus groups, traveling on those visits. For the more quantitative work that I did, a lot of times it was doing some nitty-gritty data cleaning and analysis and really spending a lot of time in data, and then some data analysis. And so we would always, for the qualitative side, use NVivo, which is a qualitative coding software to analyze our results from interviews and focus groups, or on the quantitative side using Stata. And then we get to have the opportunity to help write up those results and publish them as briefs, research reports, blog posts, journal articles, and then oftentimes we'd be able to help disseminate them too, so presenting them at conferences or to our stakeholders. And I'll end by just saying that most of our work is federally funded. At least most of the work that I did was funded by the Department of Health and Human Services. But I will, as a caveat, say that experiences for research assistants differ a lot based off of what center you're in and also what type of work you do. So some of my colleagues who were primarily foundation funded had a very different type of work than someone who did state, local, or federal contracts. So I'll pause, and I'll also end by saying I'm currently a graduate student now. I left Urban this summer. I'm doing my PhD in sociology at Harvard. And as Becca said, we'll have some time later to talk more about that pathway to graduate school from working there. But yeah, so I'll end by saying that.
Terrific. Thanks, Tyler. And Lizette? Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I did it again. I left it on mute.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, so my name is Lizette. I am currently an epidemiologist in California with the San Mateo County Health System. I am focusing on oral health while I am here as an epidemiologist. I did my undergraduate at UC Berkeley. My major was anthropology with a concentration in medical anthropology. And I have a master's in public health from Claremont Graduate University in Southern California with a concentration in epidemiology and biostatistics. So currently what I am doing is I am helping to start the county's first oral health surveillance system and organizing the oral health related nonprofits in the area just to standardize data collection, guide them on any sort of surveys or any quantitative or qualitative studies they may be carrying out to reflect their progress. And, well, I can get more if anybody has any questions more about that position later. What led me here was I spent last year in Sacramento with the California Epidemiologic Investigation Service, where I helped to begin the state's first oral health program. So, and I wrote the surveillance plan for the state for oral health. It's right now under review. And so that transitioned me directly to helping the county start their first local oral health program.
Great, thanks. And Jessie, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Jessie Sweet. Good afternoon. I am with the Colorado Department of Human Services. I am a Colorado Works lead with the department. Colorado Works is essentially the name for TANF in our state. I studied psychology at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I've been with the department for about 11 years. I started out kind of by chance as a program assistant to one of the directors within Human Services, and actually started working with the veterans nursing homes when I came to the department. And just through networking within the department, I was able to get a trainer position with Colorado Works, aka TANF, and I've been with that division now for quite some time. I've transitioned to a couple different areas within that division, and I'm currently with the workforce side of the TANF program. As a regional representative, as the lead, I provide support to the other regional representatives within the workforce program. So we work with the counties. We're a state supervised, county administered state. So our county departments work with customers and administer the program. And at the state office, we provide support to the counties through training and technical assistance and auditing and reviews and that type of thing. So I worked first with the eligibility side as a regional representative for TANF, and then recently moved over to the workforce side as a lead.
Great.
So thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks all of you for participating. So we're going to start with talking a little bit about undergraduate classes and volunteering. And although all of you had some great things to say about this, we asked Camille to really share her experience, and then I think we can, maybe we'll have some follow-up questions for other folks.
Yeah, so I think, I took several classes during my undergrad years that are relevant to what I do now. So I think, of course, the first one that jumps out at me, is statistics. And I actually don't work on the quantitative side of the projects, but just having that baseline understanding of statistics is very helpful. And actually, as I've moved up in the organization, I'm an analyst now, I'm responsible for leading different streams of work. I find that being able to, collaborate with my peers on the data team is actually really important. So I think that's, pay attention to that. And then also, as a psychology major, I took social psychology, which is proving very useful now because a lot of my projects deal with applying behavioral science to higher education. And so even though it didn't seem useful at first, like now I'm finding that I'm drawing a lot on my social psychology lessons from the undergraduate years. I think finally I took a graduate research seminar, actually my very last semester as a senior. And in that seminar, we really went through the entire life cycle of a research project and thinking about how you might develop a project on your own and what topics you're interested in researching. And I'm finding that's very interesting now, and I often think back to that experience. So I think those are some of the courses that I found particularly helpful and I find myself thinking about. I also, volunteered, a lot during undergrad and even afterwards. And I think that experience really helped me connect, on the qualitative side of the research. So I volunteer with different education and youth serving organizations. And I think that I really drawn that experience to kind of understand participants, where they might be coming from, and thinking about how to develop protocols for qualitative interviews and focus groups.
And Camille, when we talked on our prep call, you talked a little bit about how you had kind of a different career path in mind when you were an undergrad and then shifted a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting story is that I actually wanted to be an eye doctor at first, and I had, done all the things I needed to do. I took science classes. I sat for the optometry admissions test, which is similar to the MCAT. And then I was talking to people and telling them, that my plan was to become an eye doctor and then start programs to help, low-income people and underrepresented minorities, like, enter STEM fields. And, I think one day someone just said to me, it sounds like you really want to work in education, and you really are just more interested in that. And I was like, I think you're right, And so at that point, I did a little soul searching. I decided to just pursue education. And so at first I took a job, working for the Department of Education, with special needs students in kindergarten, but then I knew I wanted to work in higher ed, and so eventually I found a role as a college advisor for Harlem Children's Zone, which is a community-based nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually, that, I don't want to skip into the next question, but it's that role that helped me find Mdrc.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. And I don't know if any of the rest of you want to add in any classes that you thought were really helpful to you as you started thinking about, or as kind of looking back now and like, well, I'm really glad I took that class, or I wish I had taken a class in something.
I'll weigh in. So I studied abroad when I was in college, and by chance I signed up for all government courses. Oh, sorry, I locked up here. Can you guys still see me?
Yeah, we can still see you and hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, my computer's being locked. So anyways, when I studied abroad, I did a full semester of government courses. I was studying in Scotland, so of course a little different. But I loved that curriculum, and I think that really kind of sparked my interest in government. And so it was nice to do that, and it was just courses that I didn't necessarily have to sign up for a certain part, but that was nice to get to have that opportunity and do that coursework as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll move on and we can always come back to that. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is undergraduate research experience, and when we were talking to Tyler on his prep call, he told us about this great experience he had working on a research project as an undergrad, and we're hoping, Tyler, you can kind of tell us a little bit about that, like what exactly was the research project and then how you got connected to it.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to. I will definitely wholeheartedly echo what Camille said about taking statistics and research-based classes. It's, I think, a really important thing, and funny enough, I think my story was a little similar in that I started off pre-med as a biochemistry major in college and sort of found my way to sociology and this sort of research. And for me, it started off where I was initially really invested and involved in the direct service side of things. So I'd gotten really involved with several of the service organizations on campus and had done sort of several of the long-term sort of extended immersive service experiences. So I'd gone to San Francisco on an alternative spring break. I'd gone to Guatemala for a service project. And at one point I had been in Argentina for a summer-long fellowship doing work at a human rights office where sort of the questions that I was asking as I was working there were all really big picture. They were really kind of macro policy level questions that I couldn't answer with the direct service that I was doing. And so I came back from that experience really interested in pursuing the research side of the topics that I had been studying. And so I set up a meeting when I got back. This was the fall of my junior year with the undergraduate advisor for sociology at Rice, and had expressed interest in doing research and perhaps doing an undergraduate thesis that was around the topics that I had been studying. And so he let me know that there were opportunities to do independent research with faculty, and then also opportunities to get involved on faculty research projects at Rice. And he told me that there was going to be a class offered in the spring for a group of professors who were launching a project called the Study of Health and Migration in Mexico, and they needed several undergraduate research assistants to help out with that project. And so he told me to look out for an email, so I saw the email come in, and it was basically a really sort of simple application. They asked for our resume and for a short statement about why we were interested in getting involved in the project. And so it was a really awesome opportunity as that spring semester, because we got course credit for it, and we all each sort of divvied up different parts of the research process. And so some of us worked on the sampling frame for the project that we were doing. Some of us did document translation. So we all had a sort of wide variety of tasks. And then that summer we went into the field in Mexico. I couldn't go to the field. I had another obligation in Houston, but I stayed on as a paid research assistant starting that summer with the project. And I was able to do so I programmed the survey for the survey that went into the field, and then I did some of the data cleaning and spot checking as our staff were in the field, and then did a lot of the data cleaning and analysis on the back end once everyone got back that fall. Another really interesting, and my
You're
room
still here.
lights just went off. I'm still here, but
No.
the lights went off, so I'm trying to get
Oh,
there.
that's
We go.
funny. We can still see you.
Yeah, they're motion censored, but I clearly haven't been in this room not moving for that long. But my professors were really great in that they knew that I had been interested in doing a senior undergraduate honors thesis, and they gave me the opportunity to do my data collection through their research project. So they let me add quantitative questions to our socio-demographic and health survey, and then I got to add qualitative questions to our in-depth interviews. So whenever we got back that fall, I'd actually had all the data for my own thesis, and was able to do my thesis through that project. And then really just sort of those connections served me in the long run too. So one of the professors asked me to be his own individual RA after that, so I helped edit his book that was eventually published. And then those were the same faculty that eventually wrote my recommendation letters for my job and for graduate school. So it was a really in-depth opportunity to get to know the research process, to start to explore questions that I had about research, and then also to really form some great connections that would serve me in the future.
Yeah, great. So I probably, based on everything you just said, it sounds like you'd really recommend undergrads to try and see if there's similar opportunities at their institutions.
Definitely, yeah. And I think this is a really specific example, but I think research looks really different, and that you can get involved in a lot of different ways. And I had friends and colleagues at Rice who did sort of a wide variety of types of research, right? And so I think it's that there's just keeping your eyes and ears peeled for new opportunities for sort of either large-scale research projects that are happening, or just an individual faculty member who needs an RA. Those sort of all across that spectrum of research, they're all useful, and it's really sort of what makes the most sense for what you're looking for, and then what aligns with what the faculty is looking for. But yeah, definitely I'd say it's a really good thing for undergraduates to be looking out for.
Yeah, great. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is working while an undergrad. So most students have to work, at least in some capacity, while they're in school. And so Lizette had some great experience trying to make that work for her, not just making some money to pay for school, but also connecting to some relevant experience.
Yeah, so I had to work while I was going to school, so it kind of got extended a bit because I would leave and come back. And so because I was paying my way through school and I had to work anyways, I said, well, I might as well work in another country. So I went first to Costa Rica. I am fluent in Spanish, and my half of my family is there. So I had connections there, but I guess I kind of wanted to create my own study abroad experience while I was going through the beginning coursework for my undergraduate. And so my job was not at all related to research. It was very administrative. I could say I did a lot of administrative work, but I was just in an environment that was exposing me a lot to other cultures, to another way of living. And then because I knew a lot of medical students, I kind of helped them to carry out some research with the marginalized squatters. It's the Nicaraguan squatters that were in this one part of near the capital. So I went out and I did some surveys with them. And let's see, so then I came back and I worked at a nonprofit in a disadvantaged area of West Oakland. And again, it was administrative. I got to wear a lot of hats, even without having my BA nonprofits. If you put a lot of time and energy in, you really have a lot of opportunities to do many things. So while I was the program's administrator, at the same, that evolved into me actually giving courses to prevent teen pregnancy. I was also a case manager to mainly parents who had had their children taken away from them by the state. To kind of help with the rehabilitation process. I taught some parenting classes, even though I wasn't a parent, but I had the curriculum. So that gave me really great exposure to just the population in California I actually had not been exposed to. So I had, just from high school when I started working, I was always the translator. So I had a lot of exposure to the different Spanish-speaking populations, so from different countries, mainly from Mexico, but also from other parts, which also made me want to go to get to know their own countries. So then I was more exposed to the Latino population and Latino immigrant population. But this job in West Oakland, it was in an area that was mainly African American, and had their own disadvantages that I would have never learned about unless I had had this job, which is also why I chose this job. Because again, while I'm doing things to get a paycheck, I wanted to expose myself to things that I knew would help me later on. And finally, during my undergraduate, I worked for so there's this company that gets contracted out sometimes to carry out studies. So I was working for a company that was contracted by the Prevention Research Institute in Berkeley, and they were carrying out a Bay Area-wide study on adolescents and the media. So I was a field researcher for that, and so I got to get, on-the-ground experience with the process of doing the research. I was going out and I was just taking computers to them, and they would fill it out, and I would pay them, but I would write up reports. This is also in people's homes, so again, just getting that one-to-one exposure to people was very beneficial. And I guess I would summarize by saying that, yes, later on I had these amazing opportunities come up because I had this administrative experience. I'm not encouraging people to take administrative jobs, but just to say that you never know what will contribute to things. So having international experience, having the administrative experience, I was offered a lot of roles for leading projects, and I think one of the most amazing things was when I was an intern. This is during my master's, but I was an intern at the World Health Organization in Geneva, and because of all this very strange background of all the places I've been, I haven't mentioned Spain, but I'll do that maybe at another time if it comes up. Yeah. But basically, they just as an intern, somebody saw my background, and they had me lead the organization of the medical anthropologists for the Ebola response in 2013 for the breakout in West Africa. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. I know you've had a lot of different experiences, and thanks for covering.
Hard to summarize.
Yeah. I just want to point out one thing that you said, and I know Tyler talked about this a little bit when we talked on our prep call, that you both used your language skills with Spanish to help you kind of get connected to jobs. So I just want to kind of point that out for folks who have had the opportunity to learn a foreign language, specifically Spanish, that it might open a door that otherwise might be more difficult to walk through if you have that ability to be bilingual. Terrific. So now we're going to shift to what to do when you're looking for a job postgraduate. So we're going to start with hiring tips for working with major research organizations. So both Camille and Tyler have worked, as I mentioned, for Mdrc and Urban. So we're going to maybe start with Camille. Tell us a little bit about how you got your job at Mdrc. You mentioned already a little bit that you worked for Harlem Children's Zone. So maybe talk a little bit about that was your first job out of college, about how that helped you get the job at Urban and kind of what you do at Urban in the hiring process. Oh, sorry, not Urban, but Mdrc. What you did at Mdrc and the hiring process at Mdrc.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I did hint, I found my way to Harlem Children's Zone. It wasn't my very first job out of college, but once I realized I wanted to do education, and I kind of realized that I wanted to work with older students. So, when I saw that opportunity to be a college advisor, I kind of just took it. And there I was really working as a college success advisor, helping students to get through college. I think Harlem Children's Zone realized they were really good at getting students to college, but then they realized a lot of their students were dropping out of college in the first year, which is a very common policy problem in higher ed. And so, I was there trying to work as a college success advisor and doing my own individual research, trying to figure out how can I help my students. We were doing all of these interesting things, for example, we would give them grade award checks. If a student got an A, we would give them a $25 to help support themselves. And sometimes the students wouldn't pick up the checks, and I was just so confused, why wouldn't you come and pick up, this check? And then I actually realized Mdrc had a project called the Performance-Based Scholarship Demonstration, and of course that immediately grabbed my eye, and I just found the website and started reading about all of their studies, and I was like, this is really cool. I think similar to Tyler, I was like, there are some macro level questions that I would love to answer, and it seems like they're trying to answer it. I also really like that at Mdrc, the research was very digestible. When I was reading studies, I found that I was, I could understand it. I felt like it was very practical, it was clearly being implemented in the real world, and so I was definitely drawn to it. And so and honestly, I just applied online at that point. I wanted to work there, and so I applied online. And to be honest, I didn't get a call back at first, but I didn't give up, and then I did reach out to some alumni for informational interviews just to kind of gather more information. And, one answered, one didn't, so try multiple people. And I spoke to one woman who actually just encouraged me to apply again. She said, we do take applications online, apply again. And now that I'm on the hiring side, I think that's a really good tip. We do actually take applications online, so go ahead and fill out an application and just apply to multiple positions that interest you. I think a couple of things in terms of what Mdrc is looking for, when they hire research assistants. We are looking for, candidates that have research experience, that you've, worked on research projects before. But, it's so funny that Lizette mentioned administrative skills, because we actually look for that as well, because so much of the research assistant position, does require strong organizational and administrative skills that we look for that. So things like being able to coordinate events, whether it's research activities like focus groups or interviews, or just other types of events that you've coordinated. Evidence that you have worked with people, maybe you've worked to recruit participants or volunteers for an organization. I think that type of experience is helpful. And also if you do have research experience, that's great as well. Do you know what the different stages of a research project are? Or if you are more interested in the data side of things, have you worked with different statistical programs like SAS or STATA, that experience is good as well. We look for that on resumes. I think just a couple other things, the way the interview process really works is we would pull applications from the online system, and then we'll start with a phone interview, and then we'll move on to an in-person interview. So I think that's just kind of the sequence of steps that you can expect.
Great. And one of the things you mentioned when we had our prep call was that Mdrc really looks for people with some demonstrated either experience or demonstrated interest in like the topical area or working with these populations. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how maybe your work at the Harlem Children's Zone, which was like a direct service job, did kind of help you in the hiring process?
Absolutely. I think especially if you're interested in conducting like qualitative research and being on that side of the research project, we do look to see that you have some interest in the different, either the populations or different policies, because it can be time-consuming work, and so we want to make sure that you're interested in it and you'd be, open to reading more, helping with literature reviews and things like that. So what's interesting for me is that I was also interested in psychology and behavioral science, so I applied for a position with the behavioral science team. And because they saw that I had so much experience in higher ed and just education in general through volunteer activities, they actually brought me back in for another interview with the post-secondary education department. And then I got offered both positions, and I actually took the post-secondary one because I knew I really wanted to be closer to education, I've come full circle where I work on behavioral science and post-secondary education, but I think the fact that my volunteer experience was on my resume, that it matched my true interests. I wasn't just volunteering for something just to do it. I was doing it because I was interested. That really helped me get the perfect role for me. So I think that experience is key.
Great. And Tyler, you kind of went straight from your undergrad to urban, so maybe tell us a little bit about how you did that and maybe some of the timing, because I know urban, from our prep call, you said they have kind of some hiring that matches a little bit when people graduate from school as opposed to maybe some other organizations that hire as needed.
And I was going to start talking and being on mute. Yeah, I'm happy to. I'll be brief. Yes, I went straight out of college, so I graduated in May and started a job in DC in June. So one of my friends who was a year above me at Rice had started a job at the Urban Institute the year before. So when I had expressed an interest in wanting to do policy research, I'd reached out to her to say, first of all, that I was interested in the Urban Institute and wanted to learn more about that, and then also that I was generally interested in what it's like to do this kind of work, and if she had recommendations on where else to apply. So in the course of that phone call, I got a lot of information about urban, but also she sent me a list of organizations that are similar to urban and do similar types of work, Mdrc included, right? But there's a lot of others that are sort of our peer organizations. And so I basically started applying to organizations on that list. But she'd connected me with a couple of other research assistants in my center, the Center on Labor, Human Services, and Population, for me to get a good sense about what they were doing. And then, yes, to Becca's point, so Urban typically does hire on the academic year for research assistant positions. It's sort of expected that it's going to be someone who's graduating from their undergrad and then coming right after. There are exceptions to that rule. For the most part, we start hiring in the applications are usually posted in December or January, and then we'll typically try to have it wrapped up by March. So if you're looking for them in September right now, they're probably not going to have positions posted, which I know can be difficult because a lot of other people are already getting jobs, and you sort of have to delay that to be able to wait until Christmas time. But they will show up, and you can always email someone at the organization to ask if or when they expect to post something. And I will also sort of echo what Camille had said in terms of the process. Typically, we'll screen resumes and then do phone interviews, and then we'll either do in-person or Skype interviews depending on where you are. But happy to answer more questions about the hiring process and the Q&A as well.
Great, thanks. So now we're going to shift to pathways to government work and that government hiring process. So we're going to ask Jesse to describe the hiring process. Maybe you talk a little bit about, I know you also had a few other jobs after undergrad before you started working for the Department of Human Services in Colorado. But maybe talk a little bit about that, and then how you got your job at your department, and maybe just more generally, since you've been working there for several years now, and I know you've been part of the hiring process, kind of what the hiring process looks like in Colorado for a state government, because it's oftentimes very different than working or getting a job at a nonprofit or a for-profit organization.
Yes, thank you, Becca. So I think I want to echo a little what Camille and Lizette said. I had a lot of office, administrative, human resources, payroll type experience before I came to work with the government. And I would say probably that office experience and just getting administrative type skills to be able to work in a variety of different settings, working with customers, which essentially is what we do in different offices. That was really important, I think, for me. The first government position that I had was by chance. I used temporary employment agencies to hire a lot when I worked in human resources, and I also used that as a tool for myself when I was looking. So the first government position that I had was actually a temporary placement through a temp agency, and they kind of saw what I brought to the table and thought that would be a really good fit, and I'm very thankful that they did, because as soon as I got into that role, I realized this is really where I wanted to be. So after that temporary placement was ending, I had to kind of undertake that tough process of getting my first permanent position with government. And I will say, I think it can be kind of tricky, and I didn't really know what the process was. I kind of followed through, so I can summarize a little bit. I saw a job that I wanted to apply for with Human Services. It was like an executive program assistant position. I didn't honestly know too much about it, but it was with Human Services, and I thought that would be a good fit. To get that position, they take the applicants that meet the minimum requirements. Oftentimes for government positions, I see it pretty standard that they would have a college degree as a minimum requirement, and then they're looking for experience. And more than other agencies, I would say government is pretty big on people checking the boxes of what they're looking for, if that makes sense. I kind of consider myself lucky in that way, because I had 6 months of government experience, but I had worked in an office a lot, and they took everyone who qualified and did a standardized test. And I think there were maybe like 50 people is what they had told me taking that test for the one position. And then I did not know that. I took the test. I got called for an interview, and in the interview I was asking for further information and found out that they were just interviewing the top 3 of the test results. So that's pretty competitive, and that was for, like I said, a program assistant position, which is pretty somewhat entry level, I would say. I interviewed with they'll always have a panel for our government type positions. Mine was about 3 people, but I regularly sit on like 5 or 6 person panels when they're hiring. So kind of be aware of that. And like I said, it felt like a little bit of luck, but I just really got along with the people hiring, and had the privilege to be hired by a really manager that was really kind of looking to give somebody an opportunity and then wanted to help somebody grow, if that makes sense. So in that position, she would task me and allow me to do pretty out of the norm type of assignments. One I remember was I did a research project over 6 months for her on veterans with traumatic brain injuries, and was able to present that to our board of the veterans nursing homes, which included like senators and government officials. So So again, I don't think that was the norm for maybe other people in that position, but what I would encourage people is that there's pretty amazing leadership within government that want to help people grow into those positions. So after that, I then transitioned over to TANF, working as a trainer. Again, I had a manager that was pretty amazing, and I didn't know anything about TANF when I started. Not the norm, but she hired me in the trainer position and then helped get me up to speed on the TANF program, and then be able to train it in a pretty short time. And since then, I've been working in the TANF program in different areas. So I will say that I think that's not the norm, because when I see people hiring, oftentimes hiring managers within government are really looking for people with the exact experience, and that's pretty high on their list. Typically, everyone that I work with has done more of the direct care in our county offices, working with customers, administering the program, and then they're hired at the state to do more of the macro level administration of the programs. That's what I'm interested in, and I kind of like that side of it, so I think it works out well for me to take that path, and I think it worked also because I was really diligent about learning the programs, doing every training I could. I love trainings and opportunities that they provide, and I kind of learn on the job, if that makes sense. That's kind of the kind of person I am, and now I know the programs as well as any of my coworkers, and all of those people that know them well did work in the county, so it's a little bit unique path. But I would say those type of managers are pretty nice to attach to within government, and I think that it maybe does make sense to start out, if you can, at that entry-level position if you aren't working in the county, and then kind of go from there. So there's a couple different options with that. And I'll just add in, helping is really important to me, and I'm doing it at a higher level at government, but I think I supplement it with some of the volunteer work I do on the side, which is pretty different. I work in animal rescue for my volunteer work, but it kind of fulfills that direct help that I like as well. So I would say that the volunteering can also kind of supplement what you're doing and help with that. But I would, just like Camille said, I would be very diligent and just keep applying for positions in the government if you're looking, and kind of look far and wide and be willing to start somewhere and learn and grow, and that seemed to really work for me.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jessie. So due to time, we're going to kind of skip the next question, because Lizette covered some of this when she was talking about her work in undergrad, and we'll ask her to maybe cover that in her final remarks. Tyler, we're hoping that you can talk a little bit about how working kind of helped you prepare for graduate school and helped you think about what you might want to study. I know a lot of people in college who are in the sorry, I've lost my train of thought, but a lot of people in college, when you're studying in like a humanities kind of setting, you pretty much know you are likely to have to go to graduate school to continue in the area that you started in. And so working is an alternative to going straight to school. So if you could talk a little bit about kind of your experience there, and I'd ask if you could do it in like 2 minutes instead of 3.
Yeah, I can do it in 2. That sounds great. So yeah, so I, when I was sort of junior and senior in college, I was considering a few different sort of postgraduate opportunities. I briefly thought about law school, but really sort of started to settle in on this idea of doing a PhD in sociology, and so that's sort of why I really dug into doing this research side of things. But sort of throughout the process of doing this research projects with the faculty and working on my senior thesis, I was really kind of, again, like I was working on such a fine-grained topic that I wasn't quite ready to commit to studying that topic for the rest of my life. Being a little bit dramatic, but I was really, I wanted to see the policy side of the questions that I was asking. That's what I felt like was really lacking from my undergraduate work, was I was asking sort of very niche academic questions, but without the direct policy connection. So going to a place like the Urban Institute was actually a really fantastic opportunity for me because it's a really sort of established path that people come into Urban as research assistants, and then they stay for 2 to 4 years, and then they go to graduate school after. And it's a path that all of the senior folks at Urban know is a part of the process, and they really encourage it. So they're very supportive of research assistants going on to graduate school, and there's some really amazing professional development opportunities for research assistants, and there's great mentorship too. Sort of in terms of what it gave me, it really was exposure to some substantive areas that I didn't have exposure to in college, and it also really helped me sort of develop my research methodology and learn new skills. I think in the end, when I was applying, it definitely made me a stronger candidate because I was able to be a lot clearer in the questions that I was asking. I had really had demonstrated research experience across a variety of different types of projects and methodologies. So I think in the end, it definitely made me a stronger applicant when I applied for PhD programs last year.
Great. Thanks so much. So now we're just going to got a few, like 5 minutes left. I'm going to give you each about a minute to kind of any advice you want to have, give to current undergrads. Maybe it's time to say something that you wish you hadn't done, or an opportunity you missed, or something that you did that you think is really valuable that undergrads should really be thinking about. And we'll start with Lizette, since we had to kind of cut short your experience after graduates. Oh, we can't hear you. You may be on mute.
Again, I forgot. Yes, to any closing advice I would give is I would definitely pick a lens that you want to do your look at poverty research, if that's what you're interested in, or any type of research. So whether it be psychology, sociology, for me it was anthropology, and taking a research methods in that, it really just kind of helped me narrow down how I wanted to approach research and the sort of experience I wanted to get in order to do that. So for me, it was culture. So that's why I sought out all these international experiences and also, our diverse minorities, working with them. And I guess I would say, yes, I agree that it's helpful to work before starting graduate school, because in my case, I ended up getting, I was a very strong candidate for a lot of very competitive fellowships because I had these applicable skills and because I'd had this sort of exposure. So people just want to see, to be a strong candidate, in any role, that you can be independent, that you have practical skills, and that you understand the populations you're working with, and, you have a vision for that, for helping those populations.
Great. Thanks. So how about Camille? Do you want to give us a few tips?
I think for me, I would say if you are a little bit undecided about what you want to do, or you're not sure, or you're newly changing what you want to do, so now you're thinking about poverty research, then I would say just really talk to people, reach out through all different channels, alum, at your school, friends, people who you volunteer with. Just reach out to them and see if they know anyone who's doing something that you might be interested in. And then, I think especially as an undergrad, it's really okay if you're talking to someone, for example, at Mdrc, you can ask if you know of any other organizations that are similar or that would be, or that's doing the kind of work that you're interested in. And that way you can learn about many different organizations, because I know I definitely didn't know Mdrc even existed as an undergrad. So, I wish I had, just talked to more people back then. So I would say, talk to people and do your research that way so you can explore different opportunities.
Great. Thanks. Tyler, you want to give a few last words?
Sure. So I already said some of mine earlier, but I would say definitely get involved in research if you want to go into careers in poverty research after. And so I think sort of doing that through classwork, so doing statistics courses, research methods courses is a great opportunity. Getting involved in faculty research is important. Doing your own independent research through a senior thesis, I think, is great because it really shows that you can handle a large-scale research project or kind of across its lifetime, and that you also have a great writing sample because a lot of times schools and organizations will ask for that. And then finally, to be able to demonstrate a substantive fit with the organization that you're applying for is really important. So whenever I was on hiring committees, I looked for sort of all of the research skills, but if your work didn't resonate with the work that we were doing in the center, sort of across something, right? So either your research, the work that you're doing, or the volunteering, it was hard for us to see you there. So just demonstrate your substantive fit in addition to your research.
Great, thanks. And Jessie?
Okay, so for a workplace advice that someone gave to me too is that I try to always be the person that if you need something done, I'm going to get it done. That's kind of an important thing I've learned in the workplace, and that goes a long ways. Sometimes, like I said, managers have given me really outside of the box projects. I think they know that it's because I'll get it done and it's helped me grow. So don't be afraid to do new or different things in order to grow. And it might sound a little weird, but I think that some of my outside interests that I have also make me a more fulfilled and better employee. So I don't know, my job, I really enjoy it and it's fulfilling and I like it. And I also kind of do some of my other extracurriculars in terms of volunteering and other interests I might have. So I don't know, I'm the person that I always had a job and I always took any step I needed to and got anything done, and then feel okay that sometimes it takes a little to figure out where you're going, but I was working in a direction and getting things done, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Great. Well, I want to thank all four of you for participating in this. It's been really interesting, and thanks so much for sharing your stories. And we'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.